Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Neka. Welcome to our new series of community conversations. We are centering the Black perspective on redefining Black futures. If you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe for notifications. If you've already subscribed, we genuinely appreciate you. So listen, I need your help. We have some phenomenal folks with us. So please share the videos with the Oakland community and anyone concerned about what's happening in Oakland. Now let's get into the video.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rowena Brown, community organizer here in the city of Oakland. Have really served Oaklanders in various capacities over the last couple decades. I used to work as a licensed optician. I worked as a civics education teacher for a while, in East Oakland constituent coordinator, and currently now I serve as district director to State Assembly Member Mia Bonta, who is in the California State Legislature. And most excitingly right now, my journey has taken me to running for City Council, which is I'm really excited about. So my roots are here in Oakland. Attending Laney College, Mills College, and then law school just across the bay. And I'm really excited to be running for Oakland City Council because we know that Oakland needs a lot of TLC right now. That's how I've been putting it. And so I'm really committed to ensuring that we can help create change, but we create change together. And so that's just a little bit about me, and I would love to go into more detail.
Welcome, Rowena. Let's keep the intros going. Reverend Davis Wiles.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Quintisha Davis Wiles, Oakland native. I'm a United Methodist elder in the California-Nevada Conference. I serve in Sacramento at the pleasure of our conference committee. I am appointed to St. Mark's here in Sacramento Art Arcade, and this is my 16th year serving in the church. I am an organizer by trade. My life has been spent organizing in Oakland. I'm a social worker, served 25 years doing community building, community health, child welfare, advocacy, and education, and recovery work. So I have worked the gamut of services across the board, locally, nationally, and some international work as an advocate. And so I am also a mommy, the most important thing in the world God has ever called me to do, and a wife. And so I'm excited about the opportunity to be in this space and looking forward to us hearing each other's hearts and learning and sharing together.
Cheryl, welcome.
Thank you. I'm Cheryl Fabio. Excuse me, I am from East Oakland. Actually, I think I moved here when I was about 6 or 7 years old. I'm a product of Oakland Public Schools. I'm a product of Oakland thinking and sort of the history of us all getting to the place that we're in right now. I went away to college at Fisk, and that motivated me to come home and go to film school at Stanford. When I think about my background, it's all over the place. But I think the fact that it's all over the place, it gives me the backbone where I think about, well, what if I was making films when I was 21? I had not really that much to say. I was baking, and it took me a long time. I'm a slow baker, but I'm grateful. Even if I never do another project, I'm grateful that all of that stuff that I've done, I've worked CETA for the city of Oakland. I've managed their television channel. I've just been really in every nonprofit I could think of, all over the place. And now I'm an independent filmmaker. I love the work I do, even though it drives me crazy. I was up till 2 o'clock last night, but I do love it. I know that journey got me here, and so I'm happy to embrace it. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us, Cheryl. And Dominic.
I'm truly grateful. Powerful introductions. Thank you, ladies. Phenomenal work being shared. I come from a family of, women leaders. Always, it ceases to amaze me the depths of commitment that our sisters and mothers and aunties have to our people. And just hearing your responses just remind me of that. And that's really why I'm here. Dominic Ware represents 6 generations of Brookfieldians. I'm in Deep East Oakland. We got every spectrum of the Black experience in my family. I'm so grateful. Father of 3, went through OUSD myself personally. Actually, I wish I could have stayed on the porch. I tried to stay at Square as long as I could, but I got kicked off the porch into the streets of Oakland, and just fought my way through, staying true to, the principles that was introduced to me as family, purpose, and, peace, really, just seeking peace. So, navigating that, I found myself working at Walmart, led one of the largest nationwide movements against one of the most corrupt corporations on the planet, Walmart. Did that for about 10 years, learning everything I could about union organizing. Went over to SEIU, working with the Fight for 15, back when the minimum wage was $8.25. Connected with like-minded individuals in Oakland for the Lift Up Oakland campaign, when we finally fought to get the minimum wage after so many decades of it staying still to $12, and just, really found what I felt I was missing. Looking up to people like Jesus the Christ, Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King, like, how did they do it? How do you affect change? And it was about informing people of the power that they had within and the collective power we have when we unify. And it just shook me to the core. But, trying to, like I heard many of you testify, navigating politics and nonprofit, I might well should have stayed in the streets. So I did that as much as I could. And I went back to the community, started working in the community, focusing on the family, built an organization called Repair Nations. I'm a co-founder where we prioritize cooperative building, cooperative principles in the Black community. And it brought me here to the Board of Education, where I feel like the current leadership is extremely disconnected from our students and from our community. And that's why I've been called, and that's what we plan on fixing with this position. So, yeah, I'm trying to keep it within a minute. So.
Welcome, everybody. We'll start with Rowena. What compelled you to get involved in public service?
Thank you. Wow, I'm so always amazed to be in an amazing space with so many amazing folks. I would actually say that, service was something that my dad taught me really early on. I can remember being like 11, 12, and, we would be getting ready for church. And I remember once I said, why are we getting up so early? And he was like, oh, because we have to go pick up Sister Smith and Brother so-and-so, and they're all riding with us. And like that's what we do. We're showing up for the community. Oh, so-and-so, is in the hospital. We're heading there, right? And so like a lot of those I just thought it was normal that like that's what families, like that's what we do, right? So on the weekends, wasn't necessarily spent, playing outside. I was out, with the adults, visiting, family members and just caring for the community. So I think of it as something as like, it's just a part of my upbringing. And so as I transitioned into like my first kind of role of employment, which was in the optometry space, I had the opportunity to lead for about 5 years, a nonprofit called One Sight, and we did amazing work in OUSD schools. And so this was providing eye exam and glasses to K through 12 students. And so that's where I kind of got my original, my work in working with Oakland youth, because at the end of the day, as someone who I rely on my glasses, and just knowing that, if our young people can't see, they're not going to be able to learn. And so that's where I kind of got my foundation, and it just kind of carried on. One thing that I've shared is that a lot of times when I answer the phone over the years, and someone's calling me, the first thing that I say is, oh, I'm like, oh, how are you doing? And then I'll say, how can I help? Right? Like that is just, I realize that is just something that I naturally say, like, how can I help? And so as far as public service for me has taken over the years, has taken so many so many hats that I've been able to wear. During the pandemic, I was working for the city of Oakland. Hard time for our community. I was working on behalf of East Oaklanders, and that service, basically what I was focused in on was ensuring that Oaklanders actually had access to the resources that they needed. And so, and sometimes that also just has a lot to do with ensuring that government is actually accessible, and what is government doing. And then now in my current role, which I absolutely love, I'm able to really kind of bring state resources to the local level, kind of across sectors, whether we're talking about supporting teachers to healthcare workers, etc. And so public service for me is, I mean, in short, is actually, it's a lifestyle. Like it's what I do every day. How do I show? I'm showing up every day serving the community in various, and it's taken on various roles over the years.
You've been doing this work for some time now. And you've been living in Oakland for a while. What have you noticed are the most pressing issues Oakland is experiencing today?
Yeah, I mean, I know we know what the issues are, but ultimately, one of the things that's really top of mind, and that's why I really attached myself so much to Cheryl's film.
Mm,
Around the homelessness crisis, right? One of the things that I would genuinely say it broke my heart, right? Because I think of myself as an optimist. And so when I was working for the city of Oakland, and I remember the day they sent us all home because they said, hey, you know what? We don't know what it is. It's COVID. We're gonna go home for a week. We'll be back. And we know what happened, right? We ended up, the whole world ended up shutting down. And in my mind, I said to myself, hey, you know what? I know that the city of Oakland is going to get it together so that the folks that are living on our streets, they have the resources that they need. We're in a pandemic. This is urgent. And what do we know? We know that not only did folks live through the pandemic on the streets, it got worse. The recent results of the point in time count shows that the amount of people living on the street, living in their cars, is now up to a little over 5,000. And so and that's it's never been okay, and it's not okay for me. And so that's one of many things that is driving me to run for office, because someone needs to get to work to create actionable steps to help support our communities. And as someone who I've participated in the point in time count each time they have it. And so I've been out talking to folks who are living in their cars, living in RVs. And what do we know? We know that a lot of these folks are Black and brown. We know that they previously served in the military. They're seniors, folks with substance abuse issues, and need mental health support services, right? These are all things that are readily available for assistance through county and state funding. And so we need, one of my goals is to, as a council member, is to work together to help get folks actually housed. And then the other kind of word that we hear tossed around a lot is transitional housing. Oh, we need to make sure we get people into transitional housing. Absolutely, I agree. But also the key word is permanent. Permanent, and then the other key word is deeply affordable, right? Because, for many of us, I think the numbers are 60% of Oaklanders are rent burdened, right? Like, so basically, I think maybe the number is more like 60% of a person's paycheck goes to rent. That's not okay, right? So even for those of us who work a full-time job, most of my paycheck goes to paying rent. And so we need to create more options that are available for our single moms, just in general, deeply affordable housing for our seniors living on fixed incomes, right? So I think that if we are able to kind of work and mitigate that actually is going to help a lot of the issues that are kind of impacting the city. And then lastly, we do need to address kind of what's happening with violence in our community. Right. That's something, but this isn't new, right? This is something that has plagued our communities for decades. And so with a lot of how would I say it? Like, basically, I think that there's also If we're able to address the root causes of folks who are living in poverty, I think that's a way to help mitigate that. But ultimately, I think that there are some proven strategies that really work to help reduce violence in our community. So addressing homelessness, addressing gun violence, and then I know Dominic mentioned an amazing thing around like back when he was doing the fight for 15. We're in 2024. So we know that that minimum wage needs to literally be like 25 and higher, right? And so that's a whole nother conversation around like livable wages in our society, right? What is a livable wage? And so at the end of the day, there's a lot of work to do, kind of in all of those buckets.
Yes, yes. Air 5. Now, Cheryl, as a longtime resident of Oakland, you've been around. You've been around for a while, and filmmaker, and most recently, A Rising Tide, of which has all of us like, okay, what do we need to do? How have you noticed that Oakland's housing landscape has changed over time?
You know, I'm listening to Rowena, and I step back, you know, well, first of all, let me just laugh and say, I guess I am the senior in the room. Like that's not common knowledge to me, but okay, I'll get over myself. As a kid, Proposition 13 passed. And as a kid, I said, we're in trouble. That fact alone, the Proposition 13, the Costa-Hawkins, there's all kinds of legislative endeavors that both had intended consequences and unintended consequences. And it strapped a place like Oakland in a way that, well, first of all, Oakland wasn't very honest back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They were resisting integration. They were resisting a world where everyone had a chance. And they were running, the folks who had predominated were running to places where they had a chance, leaving a rupture in places like Oakland. That's fundamental to me because it explains why our income levels aren't living wages. And frankly, I'm watching this incremental, like when we're 150 years old, maybe we'll get to a livable wage, but there'll be so many generations that have perished that we need to put that on fire. That has to escalate quickly. I think the other thing is Costa, that whole idea that someone would impede the development of affordable housing. I don't understand. Where does that brain come from? Like, okay, I can't afford to live in Temescal, but surely you'll let me live in an apartment on Bancroft in East Oakland, right? I mean, so what's wrong with that? But things like Costa-Hawkins, they get promoted as though they are housing friendly. And what they really do is exclude us from housing. So I'm of the opinion that this issue is a function of the way that people vote, the way they understand their civic responsibility. It is a function of our living wages and our high cost and nobody being willing to jump in there and retrofit all of that stuff. But let me go back even further when you ask Rowena, why did she become service oriented? So my parents came here. My dad was a dentist. He came from Meharry. When you say he was a dentist, a lot of times I lived with people thinking that meant I was middle class. No, my dad came from an island. He went to the war to pay off that medical thing. And part of the way Meharry Medical School trained you is that you were to go be one of those community folks. So Oakland once had like one doctor dentist to 6 people, black folks. That's not true anymore. And those people serviced us in a knowing way. That's not true anymore. And when our blue collar workers went down, so did all those medical professionals. All those professions went down too. My family, they were fighters. And all the families around me were fighters. I never even thought there was another way. I come from a family of 5 kids. So some of us went this way, other kids went that way. But I followed like this. I followed my mother around. I paid attention and all of that. There was like no other way to be but to be someplace doing something that satisfied my heart, satisfied my brain, made me feel like I was contributing. And sometimes it's in the littlest, tiniest way, but it has to be contributing. It can never be distracting or the hair bristles on my back. So I guess I'm saying there's a tradition in our community. We've had to be fighters because when you got to a place like Oakland, it was not embracing. It wasn't warm. You had to fight your way in. You had to fight to get your kids in public school. So this fight that we're having in the public schools is crazy. After knowing the fight that, say, my parents went through or the families in those days went through, it's a qualitative different fight. And we need to bring that back center and make the fight about quality education for every kid in Oakland. So that was a little winded, but how about that?
It all needed to be said. Well, thank you very much. We're going to keep the conversation going, talking about education. Dominic, why don't you tell us about your own elementary, middle, and high school experience? Does it have anything to do with what motivated you to do what you're doing today?
100,000%. I think back to the first initial positive school experience I can think of was at Stonehurst Elementary School when I ran into complications, as many young Black boys do, trying to fit in and being labeled as somebody who was either less than or slower than the immediate surrounding class. How my mother stood up and responded to that charge and, leaned into the tools that were available and made sure that I was able to excel. Just, having that support system to navigate an already oppressive, dehumanized, racist system that already targets me coming in through the door was tremendously beneficial to help me stay committed to wanting to be positive, because I've seen a lot of my brothers and sisters choose to just give up and go the opposite way. So, having the PTA system, having my mother up there being a strong advocate on my behalf when I didn't know the words nor the strategies to address these feelings I was having, looking back on it, transformed my outlook on learning, not just education, but learning that I can always excel. If there's something I don't know, I can always find out. And if I fail today, I can pass tomorrow. And these are systems that I'm seeing are left and just abandoned currently because the system that we're under. And I like the point that the sisters were making. And I like to think that, it's really, whether we're talking about homelessness, livable wage, violence, all of us pass through the public educational system, most of us. And that system being the breeding ground for the majority of this, a lot of the seeds are being planted there. And understanding that under the guise of capitalism, capitalism pushes us to dehumanize one another and to look at statistical results rather than transformative or humane results, like the transformation and evolution of the human. So, looking at capitalism not as the, enemy, but as the choice of leadership I think that's the point that we need to raise, is that there are ways to navigate, understanding collectively run the capitalistic system, but you don't have to have capitalistic principles and morals to move through and make decisions on human beings. Now we're talking about whether to cut the ketchup or, if we want to just go, have tomatoes, squish tomatoes from the farm, we could be capitalist then. When you're talking about cutting, classes or closing schools, how inhumane is that? So coming from elementary school, I had a great foundation of understanding that I can just go home and I can tell my mama, and she gonna come fight with other mothers and parents to get things straightened up. Because I felt I don't know how to explain it. I know there's another brother on here, and I don't know how the sisters feel, but going through public education system, you feel that you're not wanted. You feel that you have to fit a certain mold. You feel that when your hand goes up, if it's wrong, you're going to be shamed and bastardized. So having that support system was tremendously beneficial in my childhood. Now getting to high school, there was a complete flip because I made the decision to leave the surrounding area of my community and venture out. I went to Fremont High. But I just wanted to test. I just wanted to, get out and spread my wings. I want to see what West of Oakland has to offer. And that's when I was pushed off into the streets because I had no support system. The teachers already looked at me as a criminal. I was a young Black man. I had too many questions for their answers. And when you get to that point, from my experience, the teachers didn't reflect me or my household. They see me as a threat. So I was bullied and pushed out of the schools, out of the classrooms, not by the students, but by the teachers. Why is this? What we're doing in Brookfield Elementary is we're making sure that we're bringing the teachers and the parents together to share the culture. We talked about this in the revision aspect that we're doing in Brookfield Elementary, where the the Board of Education has granted Brookfield Elementary to be the first school in Oakland to go through this redevelopment phase. And during these conversations, we're so diverse. We're having conversations. How do we bring the culture of the home and mix it with the culture of the classroom, so that the student feels supported in both areas and that the teacher and the parent, we're not fighting against one another. But, just bringing that conversation up because we have such, a diverse culture throughout our district, it's just giving people a different sense of what's possible. And we got to prioritize our students. So to summarize my response to your question, it was tremendously beneficial when I felt like I had community support navigating because I felt targeted. But when that community support was removed, I felt the pressure. I felt the school to prison pipeline. I felt the bullying head on, and I had no support system, which pushed me into the streets. Prior to getting to high school, I was tech savvy. I was not interested in the streets, and I was playing basketball. Stop, Kingdom. After high school, after losing that community support, I got frustrated with basketball. I thought technology and electronics was a waste of time. And I immediately wanted to run to the streets and find some type of solace because I wasn't being judged there. And I don't think a lot of people hear that from these kids nowadays. A lot of Black boys, Black sisters, we're being judged. And if we don't fit the mold, we're being called out unjustly. And we see how they treat other cultures, especially if their culture reflects one another. You all know what I'm saying. So it's very important to have community at all levels. But once again, when we're dealing with parents that are overworked and underpaid, we're dealing with parents that are navigating this close, like you touched on, Rowena, to homelessness. We have to understand how to make it a communal aspect to not only support the students, but make sure we're listening to the parents and we're giving the teachers, the school, the tools they need to succeed. And we're making sure that it's a cohesive effort.
Keep the conversation going. Reverend Davis Wiles. Okay, I want to give you two options here because you've already heard a lot. I'm going to ask this question, but if you can either choose to answer this or just choose to address everything you've heard so far from the perspective of the faith community. How do you view the relationship between education and faith in the development of young people? We just heard what Dominic has said. And what role can the church play? We have churches on just about every block in Oakland. What role can the church play in enhancing those educational experiences and opportunities for our young people?
I can do both and. As I was listening, my wheels were turning because when I think about education, I think about life, right? So as a lifelong learner, education begins wherever we start life, wherever that might be. And because housing is a huge part of our conversation, I would say the church has an opportunity. If we think about the history of the church and what it's called to do, the prophet Jeremiah said to the people who were in exile a long time, said that if you seek the welfare of the people where you are placed, where God has sent you, wherever that might be, and you root yourself in meeting the needs of where folks are, where they're located, not just in the institution, but where people are in community, then the church would then flourish. When I hear that, I'm thinking about the individual person, the family, and the community. So often we think about home as a physical place, my question would be, what do we mean by home, right? I was at a conference last week, and one of the keynote speakers, and it was titled Welcome Home. And my question is, where is home? We talk about home as if it's just a physiological place, but home is layered and multifaceted. And the last 2 decades, this idea of housing is not the same as home. And so the church would do well to identify and define very clearly, what is the scope of the church? What is the role of the church? There are buildings on every corner. The city of Oakland has over 350 churches, and most of them are closed 6 days a week. So if I wanted to talk about the role of church historically, the church has been the epicenter of everything community. And if I talk about Black church in particular, which I want to take a moment to just talk about, the Black church held a space, freedom schools, right? Talking about the social context of individual, family, community. That was social, emotional, spiritual. That was economic. It was familiar. And it had everything to do with civic engagement. There was no either or. The church did all of it, and it was effective because it did all of it. There was no outside of church. Church was community. And so if we get back to the basis of understanding that our role is simply to exist within the context of community and be that light. When we think about education, we've got to begin to talk to people. We have like 5 generations right now. The silent generation, the boomers, Gen X, we have millennial and Gen Z. We're having different conversations all the time, and somebody is always left out. Because what we understand to be community and family is very different for these newer generations. For my colleagues in the faith community, one of the things I say to them is, please stop saying it is the parents' responsibility only. That is a 19th century idea. Even in the 20th century, not everyone had parents. So the social worker in me says, understand you have generations that have grown up in systems and institutions or the streets. Parents didn't exist. I've had too many young people tell me I've never been at a dinner table, so I don't know what you're talking about. So it's caused me to come back and say, okay, how do we then equip the people of faith to go out and echo in their perspective, professional roles, social roles, and for me, most importantly, visible roles of people of faith to be a voice of reason. And education is about information, access, and ability to translate. So are we doing that collectively as people of faith and churches? If the church isn't aware of its scope, then of course it's failing to do its job and it's closed. And so open the doors, invite people in. Most folks can't afford housing, so they certainly can't afford the bill that comes with running a 501c3. So if we're going to talk about home, let's start housing institutions that are doing the work that we are called to as people of faith. And then we can really dig into this crisis in our community that's not new, but it is overflowing, and it is at a place of grave, I want to say, alarm, to where we ought to be crying out that there is a crisis in our community of epidemic proportions around homicide, around suicide. Literally, in an age of information, dropouts are still extremely high. People aren't dropping out of school, they're dropping out of life. And so where is the church in the educating of what is happening collectively and holistically in our communities? So I feel like if we're going to do education, the church has to begin to look at itself. What is the identity of the church? How do we show up with little resources, but more opportunity than ever before to be a witness and an ally at a time where folks are hopeless and believing this hype that is being perpetuated through social media and the powers that be to push the narrative that there is not enough. Scarcity is a social construct. There is enough. So we need to be equipped in this idea of education. What does it mean to be the church? What is our role as a church? And who do we want to partner with so that education becomes like the air we breathe, fluid and applicable wherever people might find itself? So that would be my answer to those 2 questions.
Lord, okay. Rowena, we know you have to go soon. So I have a specific question for you. centered around millennials. How do you believe millennials and the next generation can influence local politics, community development, and economic outcomes? So if we had to give a charge to the next generation of things that they need to think about, because what we're hearing is it's always activism, and we've never known how to remain quiet in situations that are uncomfortable. So what would you say to millennials?
Wow. That's a great question. I'm also just really inspired from just what Reverend Wiles was uplifting. And I just want to kind of add to this point, because as you were speaking,
Please do.
as you were speaking, it was reminding me of I was out in the community, and this was a few years back, and I was in in a role with the city of Oakland, and I was putting these signs up that said no illegal dumping. And so I was going across kind of just the area, and no one asked me to do it, but I was like, hey, you know what? I know that how our communities look impact our mental health. And so, I found out that the city had these signs, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go out on this Saturday morning, and I'm going to go put these signs all across in just some of these areas where I always see trash. Now, I got out at this one zone, and there were maybe about 5 young brothers, hanging out. And I said, hey, what's up, y'all? Good morning. And they were just watching me like, oh, what's she doing? And so I'm putting up the sign. And then all of a sudden, one of them said to me, hey, how'd you get that job? And then I was like, oh, yeah. And so then I explained like, oh, well, what I'm doing, this isn't actually under kind of my job title, but this is the City of Oakland Department of Transportation. And if you go on this website, here, let me show you. And I like walked over, and I was kind of walking them through how to tap into these organizations that are indeed hiring, right? Now, of course, a lot of times, so maybe we'll see some of these young brothers on the corner, and you're like, well, what are they doing? How come they're not trying to get a job? Etc. And I remember walking away from that situation where just knowing like we have to go to them and say, hey, there are these opportunities that are available, and they're there, right? And I know that, sometimes folks will be like, oh, these young people don't want to work, they just want to hang out. And it's like, it's not true. And so the reason why it reminded me of that story, because as I continue to be out in the community, and a lot of times what I found was just this spirit of like not having hope.